This is a Mighty Bean. Launched by Moose in 2002, these were small collectible capsules that flipped around. That was kind of all they did. These little guys would come in blind bags, and with hundreds of different designs, with some being more rare than others, these things absolutely exploded in the early 2000s. The beans faded in 2006, came back in 2010, went away again a few years later, and then came back in 2018, only to quickly fade out at record pace. It's safe to say that this toy had quite the wild ride, so let's take a look and see what made this toy so successful. To get to Mighty Beans, we need to start with Mexican jumping bean. These are seeds native to a Mexican shrub. They pretty much just jump when they're exposed to heat. As early as the 1950s, toys were made to replicate the effects of these beans, the common method being medicine capsules and balls. In 2002, the struggling toy company Moose continued on this idea, but made them slightly larger and gave them faces and made them collectible. They debuted down under in Australia. That was my attempt at an Australian accent. I apologize if I offended anybody. Despite the instant success there, North American retailers were not impressed and didn't place heavy orders on this product. So the North American distributor, Spin Master, decided to do trial runs in a few select cities. Now the goal of this was to get these beans to spread. They wanted them to spread so much so that they would get banned in schools. Yes, that was the actual goal, was to get them banned in schools because they thought it would be good PR. And as silly as it kind of sounds, they were right. When back to school season kicked off, these things absolutely exploded in those markets, and in turn, retailers began to carry this product, and more people were buying these beans. It was all uphill from there. It was the top-selling toy in the United States for 5 months, and even won the prestigious International Toy of the Year title. These things were flying off the shelves that they even ran into a shortage at the end of 2003. Toys R Us executives flew out to Spin Master's headquarters to try and get more, while other retailers wanted to get them even faster and flew them out from China rather than the traditional sea freight method. And the growth continued into the next year, and by the end of 2004, they had sold 100 million packs of these things. So what made these so special? Well, Mighty Beans came in blind packs, with some being more rare than others. Each of the designs were creative and ridiculous, with some being a little offensive looking back in hindsight. They also did a good job of keeping them relevant by introducing new special features each series to keep kids engaged. They introduced glow-in-the-dark beans, color-changing beans, and even ones that were big. They also went away from beans altogether and created bodies for the beans called Bean Bods. They partnered with already established franchises like Pokemon and Marvel, helping them grow even more. These things were so popular, in fact, that various knockoffs started to develop, but the one that was most notable were the Ja-Roo Crazy Jumpin' Beans. It's funny because on eBay I bought what I thought were Mighty Beans, and when they were delivered to me, most of them were just these knockoffs. These knockoff beans were not as well made, and when you compare them to actual Mighty Beans, it's night and day. But I imagine when you're a younger kid and you just want to fit in, it's not really gonna matter. I think it makes perfect sense why the initial run was so popular. These things were small, they were easy to bring around, easy to show your friends and trade, making word-of-mouth marketing super easy. But of course, I think the biggest reason for their success was the rarity and collectability aspect. Kids love collecting things. Outside of the beans themselves, the Mighty Beans brand released other accessories as well. Mighty Beans Bendums were just large Mighty Beans that had hands and feet so you could strike a pose with them. Unlike Mighty Beans, these things were ages 3 and up because it's harder to choke on this as a child. I imagine only Mighty Beans superfans bought this product. Oh, and losers like me. There was a trading card game, but after reading the 25-page manual, I don't think anyone was playing that. They even released the Mighty Beans Game Boy game, which was just a puzzle game that goes for $2 now online, so clearly this game performed well. One of the more iconic accessories of the initial run were the carrying cases, but I think the most appealing accessory to me were the racetracks. The Mighty Beans craze unfortunately ended a few years after it began, which makes sense because kids get older, trends die, people move on. That's just kind of how it works. Moose themselves was actually planning for this to happen, and while they were releasing the beans, they were working on other projects like this racing yo-yo and these fistful action figures. Moose's CEO thought the figures would double or triple in size of Mighty Beans, but unfortunately, that did not happen. Moose decided to ultimately give the beans another try in 2010 to see if they could recreate the magic of the original beans. These beans were clearly updated in terms of quality. They were also releasing more per series as well. itself. The original Mighty Beanz had 60 to 70 beans a series. This time for every series they would release at least 100. So what else did Moose try to do to differentiate themselves from the previous Mighty Beanz series? Well, they introduced new beans. They released square beans, triangular beans, and even circular beans, and eventually ran out of shapes to do. This wave of beans included collaborations with Star Wars and Marvel. The racetracks were updated and more interactive than the ones prior. They also had Mighty Beanz machines, which were cars for your Mighty Beanz. Like the Mighty Beanz from before, these unfortunately faded. Beanz then came back for one final time in 2018. This time they were all larger size beans, and they included 2 series featuring 140 beans each. The packaging of these were a little bit different than past iterations, and even did this cool thing where you slam them and they jump. Previously, Moose partnered with Marvel and Star Wars, so what did they do this time? They partnered with Fortnite. They released Fortnite beans. I will give credit where credit is due, however. I thought they did a phenomenal job marketing this toy. Moose sponsored traditional review videos, which is pretty standard for review channels. But Moose also sponsored this sketch video, which had 66 million views, and this domino video, which had 8 million views. By having a more natural integration, like through skits and Rube Goldberg type contraptions, these things were able to seem more natural to kids. But unfortunately, this wave was also short lived, which leaves us to present day. Right now, Moose is a billion-dollar company. They're incredibly successful. They've had plenty of other hits, so they don't need to bring Mighty Beanz back. But there still is a pretty active Mighty Beanz community on Reddit, like there are for most things that I cover on here. These beans today aren't really worth that much. You can get sealed packs for $25 to $30 on eBay, and I was able to get a pretty good assortment of these for a pretty good price. The actual Moose Mighty Bean goes for a couple hundred, but other than that, these things really aren't that expensive. If you enjoy spending your money on useless things and enjoy collecting things, maybe this could be a fun thing, but I wouldn't really count on it as an actual investment. It is safe to say though that this toy had a pretty big impact on a lot of people, myself included. But that's all I pretty much have to say. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and leave a comment. Did you play with these growing up, or do you have no idea what I'm talking about? Shout out to the channel members, subscribe, leave a like, all that fun YouTube stuff. Okay, goodbye.